There are probably thousands of videos about productivity and time management. So how is this one any different? Hi, my name is Michael and I spent over 7,000 hours of working from home managing our Amazon business. And today in this video I would like to show you in detail what I've learned over the years and what worked for me. So this is a system for Amazon sellers. And if you want to optimize your performance and do more with less, this video is for you. So let's dive in. First of all, let's clarify the objective. So we want to increase the amount of value we can produce in a unit of time. So if we look at this, we have time on one side and value on the other side. And I always thought about this in terms of time because I was conditioned to focus on time back when I was working in my corporate job because I was paid by the hour. So naturally, I thought that working hard equals working a lot of hours. But the truth is that in business, no one really cares about the time you spend working. So if we take a look at the formula where we have time spent on one side and the amount of value produced on the other, doesn't really work. Because working and not working, it's not really binary, right? It's more of a spectrum like this. And the spectrum is defined by the intensity of our focus. So the formula actually looks like this. Time spent working multiplied by the intensity of focus, and it equals the amount of value produced. And this allows us to focus more on the value we create rather than the time we spend working. And if we switch our perspective, we can actually decrease the time we spend working by increasing the intensity of our focus while producing the same amount of value. And obviously, we are mostly interested in long-term productivity. We want to move the needle consistently every single day, right? We are not talking about the one weekend when you spend 20 hours working. We are talking about every single day, being consistent and moving the needle. So the first concept I want to talk about is the concept of manager and maker. So the manager is someone who makes decisions, manages people and systems, while the maker creates value. So for example, manager can monitor sales, chat with supply managers, arrange payments. And most of these tasks are maintaining the business. And task switching for manager is expected. He works on multiple tasks in various topics, right? We have supply, we have marketing, we can have customer service within 1 hour. And he's focused mainly on short-term priorities. While the maker, he develops new processes, he researches new products and so on, and he's focused mostly on growing. And high intensity of focus is actually necessary to produce something valuable. And so task switching cost is extremely high for makers. So they are usually focusing on a single objective and their long-term priorities. And obviously, both are necessary. So how to actually use this to increase our productivity? So we essentially have two options. So option one is to have a daily schedule where we can have mornings where we are the maker and in the afternoon we can become the managers. Or we can have weekly schedule when on Monday and Thursday we work as a manager, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday we work as a maker. I personally prefer the first option. And obviously you can change it based on your preferences and situation. So when you are launching your business, you are mostly working as a maker. You are researching new products, you are developing processes, you are building a team, and so on. While on the other side, when you establish your business, you are mostly focused on maintaining and managing your team. So your time as a maker will go down, while your time as a manager will increase. So make sure to adapt to your situation. But the most important thing is that it needs to be scheduled in advance. If you want to see my exact schedule, how I worked on daily basis while managing our 8-figure Amazon business, let me know down in the comments below and I can make this video. So now we are going to learn how to do more with less. So the first concept I'm going to talk about is the one thing. This concept comes from a book called The One Thing, and I can highly recommend this book if you want to improve your productivity. So the one thing helps us to get the most out of our maker sessions. And it is basically a prioritization method, right? Once we define our goal, we are able to determine the one thing that will actually move the needle and get us closer to our goal. And once we determine the one thing, we can schedule it for our next session as a maker. So for example, If we are developing a new product, that is our goal, to develop and launch a new product, the one thing is the next thing that will move the needle, right? So in the beginning, it will be product research. So we can schedule for our maker session to do the product research. Once we have the product, we may want to look for suppliers. So that's our one thing. Once we have the supplier, we have the product, we want to create the listing, right? So our one thing for our next maker session is to create the listing, do keyword research, reach out to our photographer, and so on, right? The one thing is always the thing that gets us closer to our goal. The next example could be hiring a supply manager, right? So we have this goal, we want to hire a supply manager. So what's the one thing? So initially, we want to define the requirements, what we actually want from that role, right? Once we do that, the one thing is to post a job ad to actually have some candidates reaching out to us, right? So that's our one thing. Then the one thing is talking to those candidates, interviews, questionnaires, and so on, right? So you can see that the concept is pretty straightforward, but we always have to know what the one thing is so we can schedule it for our maker session. So the key to a maker session is to know exactly what to work on before we actually start the session. I will make a detailed video about planning and our approach to planning in the future, so make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss it. Now let's talk about the Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law says that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. And you probably know about this from your experience. The more time you have to complete a task, the more time it will actually take, as you can see in this chart. So how to actually use this knowledge to our benefit? So having more time to do a task does not necessarily mean that you will do it better. Time is a metric that cannot be trusted, as I said earlier. So we want to reduce the time available for our tasks. So if we have a maker session for 3 hours, we can schedule tasks accordingly so we feel the urgency to finish that specific task within those 3 hours. Now let's talk about deep work. So as I said before, the intensity of focus is a spectrum. So if we take a look at this, we have shallow work on one side and deep work on the other side, while deep work is the highest level of intensity of our focus, right? So if this spectrum would be 1 to 10, I would say that deep work starts around 7 or 8, right? So we really need to figure out how to get into deep work during our maker sessions. So deep work is basically our ability to focus without distraction. So we can produce better results in less time. Which brings us back to our original formula: time spent multiplied by our intensity of focus equals the amount of value produced. Probably the most important point about deep work is that we have a limited capacity for our deep work sessions. Because true deep work really feels like taking a test. When you think back when you were in school and you were taking a test and it took like 1 hour and you were completely exhausted after that 1 hour, that was deep work. That was the highest intensity of focus. So I highly recommend to start with just 1 or 2 hours per day. It really takes some time to build that up. I personally got to around 3 hours per day, and that's just my maximum. I cannot possibly get it to 5, 6, 7 hours. It's just too exhausting, right? So really do not overestimate your capacity for deep work. So really be smart about it. Do not waste your capacity for deep work. Think about this like a currency. If you have 2 hours for deep work every day and you work 5 days a week, you have 10 hours of deep work per week available. How many hours is that per month? How many hours is that per year? And how much value you can actually create? It's actually not that much, right? It's not that many hours. So really be smart about it and do not waste it. I also recommend to have a ritual to get into deep work. So every morning you can listen to one specific song that will help you get into it, right? For me, it's one song, headphones, and I just get into work, right? That's my ritual. It takes like 5 minutes, but at the end of the ritual, I know that I'm slowly getting into my deep work session. I can also highly recommend to use a Pomodoro technique. So basically, the Pomodoro technique will help us to break our workday into fixed intervals of work and breaks. So it can look like this: 25 minutes of work followed by a 5-minute break. That would be one Pomodoro. Or it could be 50 minutes of work with a 10-minute break. That would also be one Pomodoro. I personally prefer the 50 minutes of work followed with 10-minute break. And every 4 or 3 Pomodoros, I recommend to take a longer break, right? Like 20 minutes. It is also beneficial to use a timer, so it lets you know after those 50 minutes when it's time to take a break, and it also lets you know when it's time to begin working again. So I highly recommend this one, so you can adjust it as necessary. You can have 3 sessions, 4 sessions before a long break. You can have 50 minutes, 10-minute break. You can do whatever you want based on your preferences. And the timer lets you know by a sound that the 50 minutes is over. Now it's time for a break. And it also lets you know when it's time to get back to work. Now, most of these tips were for the maker sessions, right? So what about the manager sessions? First of all, I highly recommend to batch activities. So if you have activities in supply, then in operations, then in customer service, really try to batch these activities. So you do supply first, then you move to operations, then you move to customer service, including meetings. So personally, I like to have my meetings like 3 meetings in a row, and then I would focus on supply stuff, then move to operations, then to customer service, right? Another important point is that gaps between the meetings are a waste of time. If you have like multiple meetings during a day, having like a 10-minute break, 15-minute break between those meetings is a waste of time because it's hard to actually get anything done. So you basically just wait for the next call, for the next meeting, and you waste time. So really try to schedule those meetings so you have one, like 5-minute break, another one, 5-minute break, and another one. And then you can focus on other activities, as I said, supply, operations, and so on. I also recommend to follow a fixed order of tasks. So once you have the to-do list for the day, do not skip the tasks if not necessary, right? So you have task number 1, do it first. You have task number 2, that's the next one, right? It's fairly simple, but it really helps you to do everything as necessary. So you may not feel like doing this one, so you may skip it, telling yourself that you are going to do it later, then you will delay it for the next day, and it's just a mess. So make sure to follow your to-do list, right? Do not skip the tasks if not necessary. So my last tip is to not leave things open. So once you, let's say, open an email, you will read it and not reply to it, right? That's a waste of mental capacity because you will be thinking about that email. You will have to put it back on your to-do list. So if you can, and you already opened that email, you will already read it, make sure to reply to it, right? So now switching from maker to manager, right? Because as I said, if we are working as a maker in the morning and we want to work as a manager in the afternoon, how do we switch from one session to the next? And once again, I recommend to have a ritual in place. Ideally, change your environment a little. My preference is to work as a manager after my lunch break, listen to a different music, right? So I no longer need to focus as much, so I can listen to my favorite music, I can have my coffee, and I start working on a standing desk. So I can simply move my desk up so I'm standing when I'm working as a manager, right? So that's the difference in environment, and I have a ritual, so I know when I'm working as a manager, and I know if I'm working as a maker. There is a big difference how I actually approach that work. And now, probably the most helpful tip is to use time blocking, because it will help us to create the structure we need to be really efficient. So as you can see, this is the current structure of my calendar. I start my mornings as a maker, then I have my lunch break, then I work as a manager, and then I have my free time, I go to the gym, and so on. So this for me is fixed, and I really try to stick to this, right? So I want to start my work on time, I want to start my lunch break on time, and I want to end my work days on time as well. So isn't that like a job? Isn't it too fixed? But you have to understand that I created this structure for myself because I like it. And I really think that the freedom doesn't mean that you have no structure at all, but it actually means that you can create the structure you like. And I like that structure. It may not be best for you, but you can create your own. And I think it's important that we actually like that structure so we can follow it every single day. Now, let's talk about distractions. So I would define focus as lack of distractions. So when we think about distractions, I think that the best approach here is to use the inversion thinking process. So how would I get completely distracted when trying to work, right? There would be some noise, there would be mess on my desk, slow computer, slow internet connection, my phone ringing right next to me, social media, checking social media, Slack, and other notifications, right? So this is my list. Make sure to create your own, and then we will turn it upside down, right? So once you have the list, turn it upside down. So instead of noise, we would have a quiet place. Instead of mess, we would have clean desk, right? Instead of slow PC, we would have fast PC. So looking at the list, it's pretty clear how to turn that upside down to remove all of these distractions, right? Because the inversion thinking process will help us identify all of the potential risks, and then we can take a look at these individually and remove them and prevent them one by one. But the biggest one, I believe, for everyone is social media and distracting websites. So for me, it was a game changer once I started using blockers, blocking websites and apps. I personally used Cold Turkey. I also tried Freedom, and it also allows you to create a fixed schedule with breaks. And since we already have the calendar and we have the fixed structure, we can recreate this structure in the website blocker. So it allows us during our breaks, once we finish our Pomodoro, during our breaks, we can still use these websites, right? So I would focus for 50 minutes, all of the distracting websites are blocked, and during my break, during those 10 minutes, I can, let's say, check my Facebook, check my email, check my messages, and so on. Once I get back to work, automatically it will block all of these websites again. So you don't really have to rely on yourself, and it will block the websites for you, and it will force you to focus on your work. So now, putting it all together. So looking back at this calendar, right? So when we start the maker session, how do we utilize everything we've learned so far during the maker session? So we want to be in deep work during our maker session. So we will use Pomodoros for that, and we will use the blockers. So we don't check websites, we don't check Facebook, so we are focused on our work. And we are focused on the one thing that will actually move the needle and get us closer to our goal. I also personally like to wear headphones, so there is no noise, nothing. I listen to instrumental music so I can focus. But the most important thing is that deep work, the one thing, and Pomodoros during our maker session, right? And once we start working as a manager, we can change the environment, maybe listen to a different kind of music. We are not as concerned about distractions, but we are concerned about following our to-do list and batching those tasks, ideally the day before, so we have our to-do list ready. Once we get into our manager session, we know exactly what to work on. Task number 1, get it done. Task number 2, get it done, right? And that's pretty much it. I would like to share a few more tips with you. I've learned this over the years, so I really hope that you will find it helpful. Look away from your screen during your Pomodoro breaks. Ideally, look into the distance. I've learned this from the Huberman Lab, great podcast, to really look away every 50 minutes or so. So I look from the window, I sit more on my balcony, and I look in the distance so I can really relax my eyes before I get back to work. Change your environment if you get stuck. So I personally like to go to a cafe near my home when I get stuck, right? When I just can't focus and I just really can't get into deep work, I pack my laptop and I go into a cafe where it really helps me once I change the environment. It helps me to focus again. I also recommend not starting with a blank page. So when you start your maker session, always review your work from the day before to get into flow faster, right? So let's say if you develop new product and you did a keyword research the day before, and now you are trying to come up with the listing copy and you have a blank page, review the work from the day before you actually start to get into flow, because it's really hard to start with just a blank page, to start your day with a blank page. Let's end this video with my best tip. So what has the biggest impact on productivity, in my opinion? It's accountability partnership. Having an accountability partner is extremely helpful, and it really multiplies the effect of all of these tools. Once you have an accountability partner and you respect them and you trust them and you have accountability sessions, let's say every week, every other week or so, let's say even every month, it really helps you to move the needle. So if you don't have an accountability partner, I highly recommend you to find someone. It is a game changer. Well, and that's it. And if I would have to summarize this video, I would say this. These are the mistakes to avoid. Sitting down to work without a specific goal in mind. Make sure to free yourself from being focused on time and rather focus on value. Do not start your day with reactive work. Do not start checking emails. Do not start with Slack. Start working on something productive. And most importantly, do not get obsessed about productivity. Productivity is actually just part of the battle. Working on the right thing is actually way more important. And keep in mind that building an efficient team has way more impact on your business output than your personal productivity. Because your business's output is what matters the most. Good luck.